thing I've seen, and I have felt the fire get put out by too much gasoline. We're all strangers passing through a place in time. Afternoon, life is but a vision in a window that we're peeking through. Helpless conversation with a man who says he cares a lot. It's a passive confrontation about who might throw a punch or not. We are all transgressors, we're all sinners, we're all astronauts. So if you're beating death, then raise your hand, but shut up if you're not. 'Cause I am a difference maker. Oh, I am only one who speaks to him. I am friendliest of friends of God. I am a difference maker. Oh, I am only one who speaks to him. I am friendliest of friends of God.
This is the Wilkinson Central Show, home of the smoothest transitions ever in the history of What If Sports podcast. Thank you for joining me. It is good to be back. We have got a lot of things to get to. Today I'm going conference by conference with a lot of the stuff. Awags is going to join me at 8:10. We're going to do this thing together. He doesn't really know how long I've got him planned to be on, so we're just going to do it until he says, hey, my wife won't let me do this anymore. I got to go. We're going to keep him on for a while. He joins at 8:10. This is the Wilkinson Central Show, and we start right now. I'm not bringing the bias here. You are.
What do they do up there? Brainwash?
Hey, it's not my fault that your team is terrible.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
This is just honest. I'm sorry if it hurts. Oh wait, I'm not really sorry.
Put that coffee down.
Can't stop, won't stop.
This is the Wilkinson Central Show. We are now live and brought to you by Buyers Auto. Thank you for joining us as we are now 2 weeks into this thing. We are now 2 weeks into season 135, or I guess 2 games into it, I should say, not 2 weeks into this thing. I can tell you, though, this has already been one of the more interesting seasons I can remember. For one, I don't remember one of my teams being this hot to start off. And I don't mean to spend today talking about myself. I can guarantee you that will not be the case. But what I can tell you is being... I went into this season going, and I'll pull up my schedule. Here's kind of how I was looking at things. I'm looking at Florida State, Colorado State, North Carolina, and Alabama in these out-of-conference games. And my thought was, okay, Florida State, Colorado State, and UNC are all toss-up games. To me, these are 3 teams could go either way. I don't know which way these games are going to go. Bad Axe is an incredible coach with a good roster. Chainsaw was 2-0 against me before today, and I think that UNC team actually has some talent. So I did not expect to win yesterday 45-19, and I really didn't expect to win today 78-17. If I could tell you what has happened with these past 2 games, I absolutely would. But this has literally been the same game plan I've been using for about 6 or 7 seasons now, and I use it over in Rock Me too. Sometimes it just clicks, other times it doesn't. I'm sure it's got something to do with the roster, but what that specifically is, I don't know. I would tell you depth, but my offensive line has some issues depth-wise. So I don't know what is making this thing click, but it is good to finally be right now at 2-0. Some of the other games happening today, this one right here between Alabama and California, and we will get to some 1AA action today as well. This was, to me, the game of the day. And I went into this season, like when I saw Seabreak take Cal, I said that probably is the most interesting hire of this when you kind of get through all the noise, because Seabreak is a legendary coach, incredibly well respected, and he takes over a really talented team. And what makes Seabreak great isn't necessarily day-to-day game plans, which I think are more contingent on you having a perfect roster, and you really need about 3 to 4 recruiting seasons. His is more contingent on his system. For example, like if Pete took over Penn State tomorrow, I don't think Pete would win right out of the gate, because I think what makes Pete so successful is he finds specific players that match exactly what he wants to do, and he's able to make adjustments from there. I don't think he's able to just do that with any roster, though. Not that he's incapable, I just don't think it's a good fit. Seabreak, though, like Awags, like some of these other coaches, are system guys. And they come in and they say, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not really going to touch my game plan at all. I'm just going to come in, throw the ball as many times as I can, try and wear you out, and expect that the system is going to the engine's going to take over from there. And so I looked at this game today. I thought it was going to be an incredibly good game. It was. You'll see here as we look through this box score, Cal got up 32-17 real early in the third quarter, and then it was all Alabama from there as they scored 19 unanswered points, and they ended up winning this one 36-32 there in the last minute. So that, I can tell you, was one of the more interesting games that I think will likely play a big role in what happens as far as this championship is when you consider this championship. And so, like, late in the season, when you're looking at 12-1 Alabama, and you're looking at 12-1 Nebraska, or 12-1 Penn State or whatever, I think that win for Alabama may elevate them over some of those other teams and put them in that national championship game. That, to me, was one of the more interesting ones. Now let's head over to Nebraska real quick as we continue to look at these top 10 teams. Jason Freeman, off to what I think is a nice start. Yesterday he played Louisville. That, I will tell you, is one of the most underrated teams in the country. Is that Louisville team coached by Osbald. And he squeaked that one out 27-24. Today he was given a really tough first half by Georgia and found a way to win that one 49-21. I think Nebraska is in good hands. They've got 2 games left, but I think of their schedule, these are probably the 2 more winnable games, or the 2 easier games, West Virginia and Wisconsin, and then they will get into conference play on September 15th when they make a trip to Texas A&M and take on Arcade Cowboy. But you look at Nebraska, they've gotten through what I believe is the toughest part of their schedule. Now they have to play Oklahoma on September 16th and circle this game. I don't know that Oklahoma is as good as we thought they were, and I think by that point, Jason Freeman will have this Nebraska team really figured out. So that, to me, is a toss-up game, and if Nebraska wins it, he'll be favored in the rest of these games, and I think he could be one of these surprise teams for the championship. Now let's move over to 1AA, and there's really not a ton going on right now at the 1AA level. There was an interesting game there between Cal Poly and Duquesne. Cal Poly able to win that one 34-27. A bit of a close win there. Cal Poly able to take it there in overtime rather, as Duquesne scored in the last minute of the fourth quarter. I said last season I thought Cal Poly was a potential dark horse in the playoff, and then this game today against Columbus Buck and those Duquesne Dukes, I think that was a big win for Cal Poly early in the season. But pay attention to this. 550 total yards and 51 rushing attempts. He's doing this in a pretty unconventional way, and he's able to win this game with 4 turnovers. So what that tells me is he won a game where he didn't necessarily play all of that well. And you can spin that 2 ways. But the way I like to look at this is that team is so talented, even when he doesn't game plan well, they still can find a way to win. And when you have that level of talent and when you are that capable, that's when you can make some of these really strong playoff runs. And I go back, I've got that thought process because I go back to my championship run at Eastern Illinois. There were a couple of games in that playoff. I thought, oh wow, I've really got smoked here in the first half or the second half. They really took it to me. They figured me out pretty good, and I had to make an adjustment in the other half to win that game. And so in those games, I'm going, okay, he out game planned me, but I still found a way to win. And sometimes in these playoffs where you're going through just this really rough patch of 4 or 5 games, that is what you need. And so I like seeing that from Cal Poly today. You may see close win against borderline playoff team. I see a game where they were out game plan and still find a way to win. That I actually like, and I know Crondon can game plan. The other one I'm going to look at is William & Mary in Eastern Kentucky. This was a close win at the half, 7-7 at half. That halftime score was not indicative at all of the final score. I've never seen 2 more lopsided halves, and William & Mary ends up winning this one 52-31. Absolutely unbelievable. They outscored Eastern Kentucky 48-24 after that 7-7 first half. And I got to tell you, I think this William & Mary team is awfully good. Eastern Kentucky turned it over 3 times. That is due to the young quarterbacks. William & Mary, they'll put up close to 500 yards on what I believe is an incredibly talented defense. And I can tell you, when I was looking at my roster, that Eastern Kentucky team last season, I'm going, okay, I've got all the pieces on defense. I've got a quarterback issue, though. And that 52 points to me is the more concerning part of that game there for Eastern Kentucky as they prepare for playoffs. Nevertheless, we are early on in the season. And so what we are going to do now is we're going to bring on Awags. So we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to get Awags on the line, so do bear with me. I'm just going to let this thing play, and we will get him on, and we'll be back in just a minute. This is the Wilkinson Central Show.
There's nothing left to say. I know where I'm going. We're starting here today, and you know that right. You know that's right. You.
All right, keep that down. Hello.
Hey.
Yeah.
You about ready?
Sure.
Cool. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, other than that gingery voice you have.
Well, we are currently in the middle of a Buyers Auto commercial, so 30 seconds and we'll put you on.
Awesome.
We being me. I don't have a producer.
You should get one.
I really should. You want to move to Roanoke?
Dude, I make all the money. You need to move here.
All right, hold on. You're buying a car specifically fit for your needs. That's why I'll trust Buyers Auto with the purchase of my next car. Buy your auto from Buyers Auto.
There's nothing left to say. I know where I'm going.
So judging from your YouTube comments as I'm reading through them now, looks like you guys could hear me, not Awags. I had him muted. Apparently did not mute myself. And the funny part about that was we were sitting there talking about how I need a producer. But regardless of that, Awags is now joining me. Thanks for being on the show and putting off your Sunday night SpongeBob. Welcome back, Awags.
Hello, peeps.
Hello, peeps. All right, so let's start with you. And I know Ohio State had a rough night last night, but you got a big win today against Cal. I looked early in the season, and I thought Cal was a real dark horse to make a championship run. You think that was a pretty big win today, or do you think maybe you underperformed a little bit?
No, that was a big win. Definitely. You got a coach with 84 national titles taking over Jason Freeman's roster, so that's a scary matchup.
Well, it is, and this is what I was saying earlier on in the podcast, is that he's one of these coaches that can basically take over any roster and be super competitive, super quick, because of the system he puts in. So he doesn't have to get, these perfect players in to start winning. It really is one of the more interesting things about him. All right, now let's go. We're just going to conference by conference, and we'll try and be quick through these. So let's go to the ACC. I looked today. Are you a little bit surprised that Miami is 0-2 to start off the season?
Well, first of all, I don't know why we're going conference to conference. To get me on the telephone, you told me this was the Alabama show. Roll Tide. That's what you said. And now you want to talk about the ACC?
Chris, I do whatever
does anyone
I
even
can
care about
to
that
get
conference?
You on. Once you're here, though,
All right.
You play by my rules.
Okay. Well, I haven't looked into Miami that much. I know they had a great roster and a great coach, but let's look at the schedule. Oklahoma,
Yep.
national title contender.
These are close
Florida,
losses.
Yeah, he was in both games strong with a roster he's probably unfamiliar with. I don't know if they even run the same system, but I mean, that's no easy way to start off a schedule, playing Blitz, who could very well make the title game this year, and Potter, who could also.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So-
Potter's one of these guys who could be, 9-5 one season, and then the very next season find a way to win the championship. It's really iffy with him. But you look at Miami; they've still got to play Michigan and Penn State. And I tell you, hey Wags, as soon as I took over at Colorado, and I'm looking around at recruiting, and I'm looking at everything, trying to piece together, my roadmap to potentially find a way to win a championship. And I'm going, really put everything aside. The most important part is really scheduling. I mean, that to me is where some of these championships are won and some of them aren't. When you see it like what Miami is doing, do you think maybe that's a little too much?
Well, he didn't make the schedule, the previous person.
Oh, no,
did.
I know.
So, yeah, that's a tough schedule to take over a team and have, definitely.
Yeah.
But if you look at his schedule next year, he's picked up Oklahoma again. He's challenged LSU, who's an excellent team, excellent coach.
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia, who is just like the street fighter. He'll take on anybody. He don't care. And then he's got Hat Rock at Marquette, and he's got Tampa Flaw. I mean, he's not scared.
No,
I mean, Tampa wins games with terrible rosters, with great rosters. I mean, he's one of the scariest coaches out there.
yeah.
And Hat Rock's a great coach. He took Marquette in how many seasons? Let's see.
So,
He was
I mean,
there 1, 2, 3, 4. His fourth season, he finished 18th at 12-2. I mean, at Marquette.
Yeah, it's not an easy place to win. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. There are currently, I believe, 3 coaches right now in the state of Wisconsin, or at least 2. And then one's kind of in that northern Indiana competing for recruits. So when you look at Marquette, when you look at Wisconsin and find them winning the way that they are, it just makes it that much more impressive, because those are fine areas if you're the only human. But when all of those Midwest schools in that upper Midwest portion are full, they become really bad programs really quick. Miami off to though an 0-2 start. Florida State off to a 1-1 start. I got a hold of him yesterday. I look at the ACC, and I think they could be in a bit of a recruiting problem going into next season. I like where Maryland's headed. I like where Clemson is headed in Boston College. But the coastal division of that conference right now looks incredibly weak to me. And you're talking about an elite Florida State perhaps not being very good this season while Bad X has to rebuild that program. Do you think, though, if the ACC can't get a couple of teams into Level 5 Bowl, that could really, really plague the conference for the next several seasons?
Well, I don't think much has really changed. I mean, they lost Bama, who was always good for the Level 5, but the ACC hasn't been getting great bowl money for many seasons. So I don't think much has changed in that respect. But you do bring up something else. When you mentioned Boston College and Maryland, I felt when the Big East filled up, and they're probably going to get their hands on 70, 80, 90 grand every season, that BC, Penn State, and now Maryland, since Phil took over, wouldn't be as good of jobs as they are in every world. But kind of the opposite happened last season, whereas Maryland came in, no bowl money, 19th in guest recruiting. BC and Penn State are 1 and 3 in the other order. But I mean, I thought the opposite would happen. I thought there'd be too much pressure, too much bowl money from the full Big East, and it hasn't panned out.
Well, some of this, and this is kind of what I thought would happen a few seasons ago, is the Big East is just eating each other alive. Like, you're getting all of that recruiting money, but the Big East is a conference where all of the schools, with the exception of Colorado State and I believe one other, they're all shoved into one portion of the country. So you're all now recruiting against each other. You're scheduling, or you're having to game plan against one another. And it's just this constant barrage of teams eating each other alive. And so, if we had the Big Ten fill up, that I think would be one thing, or maybe the SEC fill up, that would be one thing. But the Northeast, or the Big East rather, with all of those teams up in the Northeast, I just don't know that really works well. Now, you bring up Maryland. This to me is one of the more surprising teams. I think this is a team, everybody right now needs to be watching, because Phil Fulmer came in, recruited really well. He's had 2 tough games. DePaul and Indiana, has won both of them, and he's going to win this game against Montana. So he's going to get through non-conference undefeated. And I look at all these conference games, I don't think there's a game on there that is an automatic loss for him. I think that could be an 11-2, 12-1 team at the end of the season. What do you think of Maryland? To me, that looks like the big surprise team of the season.
I think he did a great job in recruiting. And both those wins are nice wins because, I mean, DePaul and Indiana pretty much full rosters of human recruited players. They were rebuilds, 4 or 5 seasons ago, but they're full now. I think he'll go 6-0. And then when he runs into North Carolina, I really can't see him beating Jen. I can't see him beating Boston College. Florida State, I don't think he gets a win there. So I think he ends up with at least 3 losses. And I think the Virginia and the Clemson games are probably toss-ups at best. I mean, he could lose 5.
Yeah.
But regardless, just winning those first 2, which are coin flip games, taking care of all the Sims, and he should beat Montana. But that's a great start to a season. That's probably a bowl game, which it's not a given now when you have a winning record to get a bowl in Wilkinson. There's 5-10 teams left out every year who win 8 games, But I think with his schedule and with the wins I think he'll get, he should be in a bowl. And that's great for the ACC to have one more team in.
Absolutely. And that win today against Indiana, that was to me what kind of triggered that question, because Naskin, I've coached against him before. He's a tough coach to game plan for, and Indiana right now has some talent. Chris, let's move things over to the Big 12, and let's start in the North. We'll start with me. I don't mean to toot my own horn at all. I'm mostly just completely surprised by these 2 games because I don't know where it's come from. But if this is the performance my team's going to have, I kind of think I might be pretty good this season.
Well, CJ, one thing I know about you is you've always played better with someone else's players. And you're really following 2 great coaches at that school who did a great job.
Oh, for sure.
Lions fan built it. I mean, he finished number 3 in the country 2 seasons ago.
Yep.
And got an elite job, number 8, 6 seasons ago. I mean, he built the program.
He was in the championship hunt.
Yeah. I remember he barely missed it.
Yeah.
And then Bad Axe, I've played against Bad Axe in many different worlds. He's a top-notch coach.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure Florida State will be turned around by this guy. There's no question in my mind. He's a great recruiter. He actually reminds me of myself, just the way he attacks it. And it's bad news for anybody in that area because he's going to take a lot of good recruits that we're used to getting.
I love how you say he's a great recruiter and then talk about how he reminds me of you. That's nice.
Well, when you think of great recruiters, you think of me.
Okay.
Anyhow, I am impressed with your start. You beat an elite Florida State, although they're not built to what he probably needs them to be, but he's a good coach. He's tricky. And then Chainsaw always gave me problems when I was at USF. He recruits well. And like I said, in game planning wise, he gave me fits. Sometimes I thought I would blow him up by 50 and I beat him in overtime. So that's a good win. And you beat him by, good Lord, you beat him by 50, 60?
Yeah,
61,
78 to 17.
Yeah, that's unreal.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I went into these games thinking, okay, it's possible I'm 2-0, but beating Florida State 45-19. I mean, Bad Axe is a good coach. I didn't foresee that. And Chainsaw, he was at Oklahoma State when I was at Missouri, and he beat me both times we played. We played when I was there. And both times it was pretty handily too. I could not get past him. So I was a bit shocked by that one myself, getting that one 78-17. But I don't think I'm going to win the North, and the reason I don't is because I think Nebraska, even though they've got one close win and then today had a close first half with Georgia, I think Jason Freeman already kind of has the pieces here with this schedule to maybe make a push for that championship game. And I don't think he's a top 5 team. I just think the way he game plans and the way that team is positioned schedule-wise, he could do it. But you look at Nebraska, and what do you see?
Well, I can give you some advice right now. You better get him now. Because once he loads it with his players, there's no stopping that guy. And, I mean, California has a great area to recruit from, but he had to share it with Stanford, and he had to fight off USC and UCLA. Now he's got his own area, and he's an elite, so he's got a little advantage on everybody. Look out, because he takes players that I wouldn't have recruited for Holy Cross. And I tell him that. He's like, what do you think of this guy? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think he'd make the Holy Cross team. And then 4 years later, the guy's like second best DB in the country. You know, I'm like, I don't get it. I like to develop players too. I like high work ethic. I like high potential, but I just don't understand how at D1 they just turn into monsters from D1 AA players. But that's what I'm warning you.
He's got a system and it works.
If you're going to beat him, you probably have better players than him right now.
Well, we play on the last game of the regular season, and that also happens to be my birthday. So.
Well, I think we know how that's going to go then. Congrats. You also better watch out for Hypnotoad, because that guy's pretty crafty.
Well,
I've faced him in D2 before, and he's tough.
That's what I was going to get to. We really haven't talked about him. He's only played 2 sims. So tomorrow, though, he takes on Florida. I think Florida, although good, is a little bit vulnerable, and I think Missouri's got a really good roster. So when you look at that game tomorrow, and you look at that matchup, do you think maybe Missouri could clip Potter and possibly send Florida to 1-2?
He might, and it's funny because in the media guides, GT picked Florida to win the SEC.
Yep,
he had him undefeated. So Florida's a real good test for anybody.
Oh, they're very good.
I kind of think Florida will win, but Missouri's got a good roster and a creative coach. So it's funny. When you make up a schedule in this world, there's no gimmies out there. If you're picking to play a human, there's a chance you're going to lose. As good as your team can be, I think my team's really good, and I like where it's at, and it's built to my system and everything. And I think there's 20, 25 coaches that I could take a loss to on any given night. So.
Well, I can tell you this. I mean, like even some of these mid-major programs, like a Hawaii, or I mean, like Houston. We'll get into Houston later. Houston actually, I think, is pretty good this season. Or some of those Big East teams. It really doesn't matter who you're putting on your schedule. You cannot mail in a game plan. I mean, any of these coaches are capable of getting past you, and you don't know who's going into more details than you are on any given night, or who's got maybe a little bit of a surprise for you, or who just is a complete mismatch. You look at the Big 12 North, I think right now between me, Nebraska, and Missouri, it is a bit wide open. I tend to favor Nebraska winning this division this season. If you had to pick one of those 3 teams to win that division, who would you pick?
Well, unfortunately, I'd be picking you based on roster alone, but I would never write. Yeah, you've got 2 other good coaches there. I'd never write either of them off. But I'd make you the slight favorite.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could definitely, I guess I could potentially see me winning. I could definitely see Hypnotoad winning. I just think Jason Freeman, the more games he gets under his belt there, the better that Nebraska team is going to get. Now let's head over to the Big 12 South quickly. I think Oklahoma State, Texas A&M, although off to good starts, I don't think that's going to last throughout conference play. Texas and Oklahoma, I think it's going to be between them again. But Oklahoma today really did not look like they were at their best. They got beat by Penn State, albeit a good Penn State team, 53-30. Their one win was yesterday, 32-27 against Miami. Chris, I kind of think what we've seen so far, Texas looks like the team that's favored to win the Big South again. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say they're favored, but Oklahoma's probably not far behind. I think Penn State is head and shoulders better than anybody else. So getting blown out by them doesn't mean you're not the second best team, Sure. So I'm sure it comes down to Texas and Oklahoma. Texas A&M is a tough team, though. Good coach, Arcade Cowboy, solid roster now. I mean, when we're just talking about there's 20, 25 teams that I think could beat Alabama, there's 6 of them in the Big Ten or the Big 12. Oklahoma State's the one that's not, if you're asking.
Okay.
I don't think they could beat me. But I mean, Texas A&M on a good night could beat just about anybody.
Well, that's the thing about some of these teams. Like, and this is kind of how I feel about my team as well. Like, I look at my team, Texas A&M, some of these other programs. On any given night, I think we're capable of beating anybody. But when you're looking in Wilkinson and trying to figure out who's going to actually make a run at the championship or a Level 5 bowl, it's not really any given night. It's consistency. So I think I could play spoiler. I think Texas A&M could play spoiler, but I think if you're looking for the winners, it's going to be between Texas and Oklahoma. Texas today beat Notre Dame 51-17, so they look solid. Let's move over to the Big East. This conference is absolutely full. It's jam-packed. There's a lot of good teams to pick from here. I want to focus on one that I think is going to be the most fun team to watch over the next couple weeks as we progress through the season. That is Cincinnati. They smoked Akron yesterday. A mid-major, yes, but they look good doing it. They won by the same score today against Southern Methodist, a sim team. They're going to get through non-conference undefeated, Chris. I look at Cincinnati. I think they're a dark horse to win the Big East. Tampa's their coach. So
I know Tampa's their coach.
That's like 60% of the reason.
Well, yeah. I mean, Tampa, like I said before, Tampa can win with a bad roster. He can win with a good roster. You can't take him for granted. He's always upset-minded. He's a giant killer, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't think he has the roster to win all the games he needs to win the Big East.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a fair point. Where I really like him, though, so he's got this quarterback, Wayne Hatfield, who I think is one of the better quarterbacks in the country. We're looking at him right now on YouTube. I mean, this guy's got a super high tech rating. Guess has him rated a 74.6. He's got a good receiver to go along with it, Jerry Ford and Jerome Morgan. So 2 really good receivers. I think that team could air it out. Look at the Big East. Lots of good teams. UConn, Pitt, Rutgers looks good. Syracuse, I think, very capable. And then, of course, Marquette, who we talked about a little bit ago. And we haven't even really got into Louisville or South Florida, who are both really well-coached teams. This looks like it's going to be a bloodbath once we get to conference play. But you had to pick one. Who do you think wins the conference?
If I had to pick one, because it does look like a bloodbath. It looks like they'll eat each other up. There's a ton of Hall of Fame coaches in there, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick Syracuse.
So you would pick Syracuse. GT Deuce has been around the world for a while, has yet to get that coveted national championship. I think winning the Big East is kind of going to become its own award by itself. Do you think he has the potential to win this conference within the next couple of seasons?
Oh, definitely within the next couple of seasons. I think he needs to get the roster where he needs it to be. And that Connecticut has been the doormat of the conference for several years now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their best season in the past 4 seasons is 4-9.
Wow.
So he's got some work to do there. I mean, I don't know how many titles he has. He's one of my mentors. I mean, he probably has 50, 60, 70 national titles. He'll definitely get it going, but Z32 has been at his school he's in his 5th season, so he's got a complete roster of his own guys. He's an accomplished coach. I think this is his conference to lose. Everybody else has a little something against him.
Yeah,
I don't see anything on him. I mean, he's got everything he needs to win this conference on that roster.
Well, that's a good point. We talk about scheduling. He beat Army yesterday, plays Clemson tomorrow. I would keep that game with Clemson circled because Coach Odie is a great coach in this world. Clemson's got some talent on that team, and these are 2 programs that if they've got hopes of a Level 5 bowl, that is a must-win game. Here's one of the big advantages to being in the Big East. You look at Syracuse's schedule, Army, Clemson, Central Michigan, Montana. I can't make that schedule. Awags, you can't make that schedule. Because if we do that, the SOS will be way too low. But in the Big East,
well, no, I don't think so. I think it depends on who those teams play. I mean, I can't make that schedule because none of those guys would accept a game for me.
Well,
Army,
well,
none of those guys would accept, but they accept it from Z. He's thinking about his schedule. He wants mostly mid majors who, in the out of conference, it's going to depend who they schedule. But let's say Army's 0-2. Let's say they go 2-3, 3-2. When they get back to conference, they're going to win games.
Yeah.
So that's what he's looking for. It's all about win percentage of your out of conference. It's not how good they are, really.
Sure.
So if Army turns around and ends up with 9 wins, that's a big plus. Any sim you play in these worlds is going to be 4 wins or less. So,
yeah, that's a fair point, and should be also noted. We should also note Central Michigan, one of the mid majors on his schedule, that I think he wins off to a 2-0 start, so that's going to help him out some as well. We look at some of these mid major teams. If you had to pick a mid major right now to be kind of your favorite, who would that be?
Well, I like Pete.
Yeah.
But he lost to Houston opening game.
He did.
So you kind of got to go with Houston, don't you?
Well, what do you think of Houston? I looked at Houston, and I thought this roster and this game plan was so unique that it would be incredibly difficult for a first-season coach to go in and win right away. But True Devil got a big win there against Hawaii in week 1. Is he for real?
Yeah, well, if you know why he took that job, that was the only D1 job he said he was willing to take because it's currently running the system that he wanted to run. So it makes sense that he'd come in there, and you've got Ebel who built the roster perfectly and ran it to a what he finish number 2 in the country last year,
Yep.
10-5. I mean, 3 top 10 finishes by mid-major. The team's established, the system's there. I'm sure True Devil talked to Ebel and said, "Hey, what are you actually doing here? I want to do the same thing." And boom.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's a fair
happens.
point. But the fun part about that game, though, Chris, was we always like to talk about this Houston offense that comes out with shotgun and, they're able to put up all these points. That was a low-scoring, possession-filled game that ended up being 26-22. So he didn't really even rely on that offense all that much. Now, he has Rutgers coming up here on September 12th. I don't think he's capable of winning that one. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I hate to agree with you, but I think Allen and Rutgers will pull that one out.
Yeah.
I think he's got more talent, and talent will beat the system.
Yeah, that part I would agree with. But Houston does so far look impressive. We'll pull up one more mid-major, and it is Hawaii, coached by Pete 61. Off to an 0-2 start. This, to me, Chris, is one of the most amazing things about Wilkinson. You come in here, you're one of the best coaches, Hall of Fame coach. I mean, first ballot Hall of Fame for Pete, and he's 0-2. You look at that, and are you a little bit worried about Hawaii? Could this maybe be a down season for them? Or do you think Pete is able to get that Western Athletic Conference title?
I'm sure he wins the WAC, It's just his out-of-conference schedule. He went for it.
Yeah.
Houston, West Virginia, Louisville, DePaul. And he picked Buffalo. That's now a sim, but, I mean, Buffalo was a 10-win, 12-win team almost every season previously. So he actually scheduled real well if he wanted to get a level 5 bowl. But there's really probably 3 coin flip games in here, and he lost the first 2 of them. So it didn't work out. But I mean, if he went 5-0 and out of conference, he'd be in a level 5 bowl.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Let's get to one more Sun Belt team to try and get everybody some discussion here. Let's go over to Navy, off to a 1-1 start, coached by JJL 5'8". They were able to beat Eastern Carolina yesterday 50-49, and then today they played what I would consider at least a decent Arizona State team and made that one go to the last possession, just losing their 27-20. They've got Louisville tomorrow and then Florida on the 13th. I kind of like what Navy's doing right now. This has always been one of the more competitive mid-majors. And now you're seeing some of the better programs willing to put them on the schedule. You look at this team, where do they rank for you as far as these mid-major programs are concerned?
They're probably third. It's the number one location as far as I'm concerned for recruiting for a mid-major.
Agreed.
It's a great place to be. The schedule's a little tough, and it's kind of cool game tomorrow because wasn't Oswald the last coach at Navy, and he went 14-1 last year.
Yep.
And now he's taking on his old school, so that's kind of a neat game at Louisville, and I'd say that's kind of a toss-up game. I think Navy can give them a game.
Oh,
but
for sure. Yep.
I don't think they can compete with Florida, but Navy can come in the Sun Belt and do some damage within the conference.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think that will be a fascinating one to watch tomorrow. Let's move over to the Big Ten real quick, and then we'll jump into the Pac-10 for a moment. Roxy 11 at Ohio State, your school. That's who you like. Job status is at secure. They're off to a 2-0 start right now. That just includes the wins against Kent State and Akron, so they haven't played anybody yet. They've got South Carolina here in a couple of days. What do you see from this Ohio State program? Can they get it together this season?
Yeah, I think they are together. I liked what he did in recruiting. He's a good coach. His scheduling's, the worst case scenario, he's 4-1 in the out of conference. South Carolina's a nice test for him. He should be South Carolina, but I don't know if I ever have. So
South Carolina's a good team.
Yeah, no, Trey's a great coach, and he's very creative. Sometimes doesn't have the talent, but wins anyways. So that's a good test for him. I mean, he should be 5-0, but I can see him dropping that one. He'll get to Michigan State. I mean, he doesn't probably face anyone that could beat him until he faces Nortonis at Penn State. I mean, I could see him losing only the Penn State game all season. So, yeah, he'll probably be a top 10 program.
Yeah, no, I think Ohio State's got a good team this season. And you look right now, I mean, they've got Notre Dame at the end of the season. Notre Dame does not look great so far. I don't know if CFB fans just away, if that team's actually down, what's going on there, but they're off to an 0-2 start.
We'll figure that out tomorrow because I got them tomorrow.
Oh, you've got them tomorrow?
Yep.
Oh, wow. So that'll be a big game for you. So Alabama, Notre Dame tomorrow. I don't know what's going on with them, but they're off to an 0-2 start. You mentioned South Carolina, though, and here's what I think is interesting. Every conference, I think, needs that one coach who's at a non-elite but is just an absolute pest to play. Jason Freeman at Cal for the Pac-10, I think, was that guy. And I think Natty Dog at Washington of the Pac-10 is becoming that guy there. You've got Trey Omo. You look at the Big Ten, I think Wisconsin has that guy, Paul Suberlak. He's at Wisconsin. They're off to a 2-0 start. They've smoked 2 Sims. Tomorrow they get their first real test. They play Texas A&M. I like what Wisconsin has done so far. Do you think this could be a really competitive team in what's already a pretty stacked conference?
I don't know if he's ready for it this season.
Yeah.
But I like what Paul has done. Every stop that he's been at in Wilkinson, he's elevated the team that he's taken.
Yeah.
Look at what he did at Dayton, 13, 14, 12, 13 wins. I mean, and before that, he had won a conference title 7 seasons in a row. I mean, Wisconsin's lucky to have him. I think that's a real good match. And I look for great things from Wisconsin. It's going to put a lot of pressure on Minnesota, that's for sure. Because I think Minnesota's had one of the easier routes in Wilkinson to recruiting. But now with a new coach at Wisconsin, plus you still have Pat Rock there at Marquette, it's going to be tougher. Plus, Jason Freeman coming out of Nebraska is going to be putting pressure on Minnesota also.
Yep. I completely agree with that. I do really like the direction that Paul has Wisconsin right now. I think that is definitely a team to watch. And I think Michigan this season is another team. Keep your eyes on them, because I think once Lions fan gets Michigan built the way he wants, they're going to go toe-to-toe with Penn State, and that's going to be super exciting because we're going to get a lot of back-and-forth games between him and Nortonis. Now let's head over to the Pac-10. Washington got that big win against Tennessee today. They look legit. California, I think, is really, really good, although they're 1-1. UCLA, I think, is super competitive. And then we get to USC, a school that has been left out of winning this conference for the past several seasons, thanks to Jason Freeman. But EZ37 and his son, the other EZ, off to a 2-0 start, and they play Michigan tomorrow. So, Chris, I think this is the game. It's the coming up party for USC where they return to that top 5 stage and potentially make a run back at the title game. What do you look at tomorrow with that game against Michigan?
That's a tough one. I still think Lions fans a year or two away.
Yeah.
Just getting the roster the way he wants it. Not that he has a bad roster, because he totally doesn't. I mean, it's a great roster, but to fit what he's trying to do, he probably needs to just have something a little different. I'm looking at USC's schedule, and you got Michigan, LSU, West Virginia, and I'd favor him in all 3 of those matches, but I almost feel like he's going to drop one of them.
Well, yeah, that definitely could be the case. I mean, West Virginia, you cannot sleep on that team because they can score a bunch of points.
That guy he's not scared of anybody, man. Look at his schedule. Alabama, Hawaii, Nebraska, Minnesota, USC. Next season, Alabama, Nebraska, Minnesota, Miami. I mean, he don't care. He's here to fight.
I'm a little bit surprised he's even willing to play Minnesota. That seems a little bit beneath what he likes to schedule. But you do look at that USC schedule. I mean, you just mentioned that of conference games, but check out this conference schedule. They've got California's second game of conference play. Stanford's in there. UCLA is going to be tough. And I think that BYU team, nobody's really talking about them. It's going to take a linebacker a couple of seasons to really get them going. But I think that's another coach. You can't sleep on him because he's so creative and can jump up and get you. And if they win through all of that, they're still going to have to play either a rematch with Cal or Washington in the conference championship. So, Chris, Easy dominated this conference before Jason Freeman really got his feet wet. Can they get it back together this season with that schedule and that conference still being this competitive?
Yeah, they definitely can. And I would say they're probably favored to win the conference. But Cal's definitely going to have something to say about it, and maybe Washington too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, as we exit our 1A discussion for this evening, if you had to pick 2 teams making the championship today, who do you think are the 2 most likely teams to meet each other in that coveted national championship game?
Penn State versus Penn State. How's that? I'd say Penn State versus Texas.
Penn State versus Texas. That I would agree with you on. I think Texas is going to roll through non-conference play, and Penn State should as well. Now, I know you're not much of a 1AA guy. Hopefully, True Devil will kind of lead us in more of the discussion there with his show in the coming days that he has promised, and we'll hold him to that. But let's discuss 1AA a little bit here. William and Mary off to a strong start. We have seen this before. They come in yesterday, they smoke Robert Morris 83-20, and then today they beat Eastern Kentucky 52-31. They have Youngstown State tomorrow, and then Marist on the 12th. This feels like, again, William and Mary looks like the strongest team in 1AA, maybe even the favorite, but they've not been able to take that next step. You also at Holy Cross looked like a couple of seasons maybe the favorite, but couldn't take that next step. Is this William and Mary's season, or do you think there's something with Duke Legend that just does not click in playoff time?
No, I just think it's real competitive. But we'll know by week 5 or so. I mean, look at the schedule.
Yeah.
Eastern Kentucky, Youngstown State, Marist. I mean, he's not hiding from anybody.
Oh, no, not at all.
I mean, what's his easy game? Robert Morris or Grambling State.
Well, and Robert Morris
Like I
hasn't
say,
been a joke the past couple of seasons. I mean, that's a good team. Playoffs, 3
and-
straight seasons.
Yeah, he
in a
put
row.
83 up on that good team. So I mean, he's not hiding from anybody. I've liked him for the past couple years, and he's come up a little short. Maybe this is the year. And when you try to put him and Holy Cross in the same, Holy Cross, I wasn't there for anywhere near long enough. If I stayed another 2 years, I mean, you guys were smoked. But I didn't
Wow.
want to let that USF GM go total sim, so I had to jump.
Well, you can't win championships in 1AA running an all-pass offense in Wilkinson.
Oh, please.
Let's check out some of these other teams here. Let's head over to the Big Sky. Macbether over at St. Mary's. I just keep waiting for this team to really click. Today he got a big win against Tennessee Tech. Not a bad team either. 51-6. They've got Samford in a couple of days. That should be another tough game. And then you've got Texas State in the other division of the Big Sky, along with Stephen F. Austin and Cal Poly. This, to me, I think is one of the more wide-open conferences, not just geographically, but actually as far as who could win it. When you look at this conference and the way things are shifting early on so far, who do you see as the favorite?
I look at Texas State as a favorite, but that's a really nice conference full of good coaches.
Yeah.
I really like what Crondon's been doing, and he's really built up his resume. And speaking of, I expect him and Macbether to jump to D1 next year. I kind of got that feeling with Macbether. It looks like this season would get him qualified for D1. I don't think he's 100% engaged, and Crondon really would have jumped last year if he had the opportunity. So I think this conference gets a little weaker next year, but this conference right now is a lot of fun.
Now, if you're either one of those coaches, what 1A school would you look at?
Me personally, the one that jumps out to me is Arkansas. In Wilkin D1, there's very few teams that kind of have their own area right now. It's so crowded. You're talking about 3 in Wisconsin. You know, there's not enough talent for 2 schools in Wisconsin. Arkansas has a little bit of a 180 and a 360 that nobody really bothers them too much. They've got Oklahoma coming east a little bit, but LSU and myself, we have to pretty much reach to get into the state. I mean, it's a great location and a good conference. I'm kind of surprised it's not taken already.
Yeah.
But then there's actually some real good mid-majors to jump on. Like, I mean, Buffalo had a history of, I mean, last season they were 8-6, but before that, 11 wins, 14 wins. Real solid roster. I think Kent's a sim now, and Kent had Babsick and Z32 Fanatic as the last 2 coaches.
Yeah.
So they're going to have some upperclassmen talent. I mean, there's a couple good mid-majors out there, but as far as a Power 5 conference goes, I don't understand why Arkansas is not taken.
Well, Arkansas is a nice spot. What I have always said, though, about some of these mid-majors is I would take one of those programs in a heartbeat. Especially if I was like a newer coach and still trying to learn and understand the game, because you're not going to get fired in 4 seasons there. You can really actually build a roster. You can build, I mean, like if you took the best roster in 1AA and plugged that into 1A, that's a good roster. Well, you can obviously do that with a mid-major program and even go on to win some of these mid-major games. And if you do that for 4 to 5 consecutive seasons, you can land yourself a really nice 1A job once it opens.
Now, you could land an elite. I mean,
yeah.
If Ebel hadn't cut so many players, he'd be at elite right now. There's no question.
Yeah.
I mean, his resume, the only resume that was better than his probably that was in the hiring game for the past 3 seasons was Freeman. So we had a couple elites come up. He would have got Miami for sure. And it's funny because I think Miami's like his favorite school too, and he just didn't have the reputation to get it.
Well, sometimes you run these super competitive or super detailed rather game plans and systems, and sometimes that involves taking on a couple of red shirts and then cutting them, and so that's going to play into prestige, and it just takes away from that And so that can certainly hurt you. But as you mentioned, though, had he not been doing that and had just been super competitive with Houston, he would have been right there in line for that Miami job. I mean, I don't think people realize this. If you can win 10, 11 games as a mid-major, you can finish in the top 20. Well, if you do that consistently, and by the way, these conference championships, that plays into your ability to get one of those jobs too. Here's a question.
I think that's actually a big deal. The conference title, I believe, is a really big deal in the hiring process. Any of the mid-majors is an easier path to a conference title, and I believe the game doesn't distinguish between conference title for the SEC or the MAC.
That was my next question. So if you've got 5 MAC conference championships and 5 ACC conference championships, that is really viewed the same. Now, your rank because of winning the ACC versus the MAC might be different, but that alone is viewed just the same. So if you could get, 5 MAC conference championships instead of just 1 or 2 ACC championships, that would make all the difference in the world to me in looking at some of these jobs.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it comes down after you have the championships. It's did you win your bowls and how many wins do you have?
Mm-hmm. Yep, completely agree with that as well. Now we look at some of the 1AA teams. I think one of the more interesting teams playing right now is this Georgia Southern team. They have only played 2 sims, but Chris, I like the way they're winning these games. 80-0 yesterday, 72-0 today. J9, I think, is one of the better coaches. They seem to be taking your approach of let's just throw the ball all the time. They had 82 passing attempts today for 11 total touchdowns. I think Georgia Southern maybe could be that surprise team that makes a Final Four run in playoffs. You look at this team, J9, the coach. Is this one of the better teams in the country right now?
Yeah, I mean, he took over for Coach Odie, who did a good job building it. And I've run into J9 in several worlds. I believe he had like Florida at maybe it was Hayes that I ran into him. He's a real good coach, and I'm quite sure he beat me a few times. So
yeah,
I definitely think that he's a contender and maybe even move up to D1 also.
But potentially, I tell you what, we start getting in these coaches. We get upwards of 80 plus 1A coaches. It's really going to get wild up in 1A. Delaware State, just the guys to coach, beloved media member. They've yet to really get into the meat of their schedule, but they are off to a 2-0 start. I think once you get into that second and third season as a 1AA team, you can really start to make some noise. You could, if you're a smart coach, make a run at the second round of playoffs in your second or third season at 1AA. Is this the season where he gets to playoffs and makes a real run, or do you still think it's going to take him a season or two to get this puppy going?
I think he's definitely a playoff team. And he's doing a great job with his rebuild, but I don't know about making a run. I think maybe that's probably a next year thing when he has, 3/4 of the roster is.
Yeah, it's certainly a good point. And then let's end with this. Marist, they do this every season, off to a 1-1 start. That loss was yesterday to Texas Southern, 51-10. Texas Southern has been that pest. We all talked about, nobody expected this to be the team to beat. We all expected Vikes Rule to come in and kind of unbuild this roster. But since he's arrived, 40-0, 2 consecutive national championships. They just smoked Marist. Is Texas Southern for real again? I mean, can we still not sell this team?
No, they're still for real. I don't know if they're getting better. Nitrous had a great roster, and I'm just kind of looking up and down, and some of the players don't look up to the same standard that the upperclassmen do. But he's winning. He's undefeated. I mean, he's the guy to knock off. So until somebody beats the guy, he's the favorite to win it all.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Listen, Awags, it was an absolute pleasure having you join the podcast. Thanks for being a part of it. Any closing thoughts as we end tonight?
Yeah, I'm really surprised you didn't talk about Dayton as the favorite to win everything, even the national championship in D1. Alex is the coach, and they're the best. So it's going to be real hard for anyone to beat them ever.
Well, they're off to this fantastic 1-1 start.
They'd probably beat the Patriots. Just saying.
Well, they would beat
True
the
story.
Patriots, and Texas A&M is a better program than Ohio State because of potential.
Texas A&M's a pretty strong program.
They're not. They wouldn't even be they're not the third best program in their own state.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty big state. That's really not
a big
saying
state.
Too much. Yeah, there's a lot of good football played there. Their high school stadiums are bigger than Duke's.
Well, yeah. No, they are. They've got a high school stadium that seats 45,000.
We've got that in Ohio. I'm sure they've got bigger than that.
Y'all have a 45,000 high school stadium?
Yeah. We've got a suburb of Columbus that has 3 high school stadiums with field turf that costs $5 million.
Jeez. Who's funding that?
It's just a suburb. The Peeps. I mean, football's big. Come on.
Well, that to me seems like the perfect note to end the night. So, Awags, thanks for being a part. It was an absolute pleasure having you.
That's a nice story now, CJ. Beat it.
All right, that was Mr. Awags joining us tonight. He really gave us a lot of good discussion this evening, so it was a pleasure having him on tonight's podcast. Of course, this whole evening has been an absolute pleasure with you all joining us. Now, I'm going to ask this of you guys. You all know I host 2 other podcasts, one being the CJ Sweat Show. That will be live Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Plan is to be on Facebook Live, although last week we had to come here to YouTube. There will be links available in the forum. Please join us. I always love when you guys come and participate in the discussion. And really, we've got a lot of other people outside of What If Sports that listen to that. So that's a great opportunity for you guys to come and just also be chatting about What If Sports things and to maybe get the word out about what we're doing. And that will hopefully tune some of these other people in and get them in on our wonderful game as well. The other podcast I do is available on iTunes, in the podcast store. You can also find it on Google Play or TuneIn Radio. It is called The Saturday Six. We had one of the best podcasts this past weekend. Had a friend from Auburn join us. We take the 6 best games every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and break it down for you. So we're going to give you predictions, fantasy predictions, different things you can do there. Really is a lot of fun to do that podcast. So I would appreciate if you all would go to the podcast app, subscribe there to that new podcast called The Saturday 6, available on Google Play, TuneIn Radio, and iTunes. All right, again, thank you all for joining us. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. A big thanks to Awags coming on completely last minute to bring him on, and boy, did he bring it tonight. Absolutely great. The plan will be to be back here hopefully in a couple of weeks. Probably we'll have to get in a Thursday night show. This is the Wilkinson Central Show. We'll be back.